I never knew a dress could feel like a homecoming. The first time I slipped it on, soft, lilac chiffon with a neckline that dipped just enough to make my breath catch, I didn't recognize the person staring back at me in the mirror. Not because she was unfamiliar, but because she was too familiar, like a melody I'd hummed in secret since childhood but never dared to sing aloud. My hands trembled as they smoothed the fabric over hips that still felt like borrowed land, and my throat tightened with something between terror and triumph. I'd spent 23 years folding myself into a shape that never quite fit, tucking away every flicker of longing behind layers of denim and silence. But here, in this quiet bedroom with the curtains drawn and the world shut out, I wasn't hiding anymore. I was becoming. It started with a whisper, a thought I'd chased away 1,000 times. What if I tried? Not as a joke, not as a costume, but as a truth. The idea clung to me like static after laundry day, buzzing under my skin until I couldn't ignore it. I'd scroll through videos of transformation journeys late at night, not out of fantasy, but out of hunger, a deep, aching need to see someone else's reflection echo my own hidden self. I bought my first wig online with a burner email and cash, heart hammering as I clicked place order, convinced the package would arrive stamped with judgment. But it didn't. It arrived wrapped in plain brown paper, holding not shame, but possibility. The mirror became my confessional. At first, I only dared to stand before it in borrowed eyeliner and oversized sweaters, testing the waters of my own gaze. Then came the padded bra, the shapewear, the careful contouring of jawlines and cheekbones with makeup I barely understood. Each session was a ritual, a slow unspooling of the armor I'd worn since puberty. And with every layer I added, something inside me loosened, like a knot I hadn't known was strangling my breath. But the dress was different. It wasn't just clothing. It was a declaration. I'd found it in a second-hand boutique tucked between a laundromat and a bakery, its hanger slightly bent, its tag yellowed with age. The shopkeeper, an older woman with silver-streaked hair and eyes that seemed to see right through me, simply smiled and said, "That one's been waiting." I didn't ask what she meant. I just paid, clutching the bag like it held a secret too precious to name. Now, standing in it, barefoot, makeup smudged from nervous tears, hair still damp from the shower, I felt both utterly exposed and completely safe. The fabric whispered against my legs as I turned, catching the late afternoon light filtering through the blinds. For the first time, I didn't flinch at my reflection. I leaned closer, tracing the curve of my cheek with a fingertip painted in soft rose. "Hi," I whispered. And the girl in the mirror whispered back. But then the doorbell rang. My stomach dropped like a stone tossed into a well. Panic flared hot and sharp. Who is it? What if it's my roommate? What if they see me like this? I scrambled to peel off the dress, but my fingers fumbled with the zipper, snagging on the lining. The bell rang again, longer this time, impatient. I froze, heart pounding in my ears, caught between two worlds, the one I'd built to survive, and the one I was just beginning to live. I stood there, half-dressed in truth and half-dressed in fear, the lilac fabric bunched around my waist like a half-finished promise. The doorbell rang a third time, sharp, insistent, and with it came the muffled voice of my roommate, Jamie, calling through the door, "Hey, you in there? Forgot my charger." Relief washed over me so intensely it made my knees weak. Jamie. Not a stranger. Not my parents. Just Jamie, who'd shared microwaved ramen with me at 2 a.m. during finals week and once held my hair back when I got food poisoning from that sketchy taco truck. Still, my pulse thrummed like a trapped bird. Because Jamie had never seen this version of me. No one had. Just a sec. I called back, voice cracking slightly. I yanked the dress off, folding it with trembling hands and shoving it under my bed like contraband. I splashed water on my face, scrubbing away the eyeliner and blush, but traces remained. Pink smudges beneath my eyes, a ghost of contour along my jaw. I threw on a hoodie, the oversized gray one that swallowed my frame, and opened the door just a crack. Jamie stood there, phone in one hand, backpack slung over a shoulder, completely oblivious. "Dude, you look wrecked," they said, squinting. "Late night." "Something like that," I mumbled, forcing a laugh that sounded more like a cough. They handed me the charger, already turning to leave. "Cool. Hey, you coming to Maya's party Saturday? She said everyone's gonna be there." The question hit me like a gust of wind. Maya's party. Loud music, string lights, people laughing in clusters, bodies pressed close in that warm, chaotic way parties have. The thought of going as me, as the boy everyone expected, suddenly felt suffocating. But the idea of showing up as, impossible. And yet, the seed had been planted. I nodded slowly. Yeah. Maybe. Jamie grinned. Sweet. Wear something fun for once, yeah? You always dress like you're auditioning for Sad Librarian, the musical. They walked off down the hall, boots echoing, and I closed the door, leaning my forehead against the cool wood. Wear something fun. The words echoed in my chest. Fun. Not safe. Not invisible. Fun. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, replaying every glance, every assumption people had ever made about me. At school, I was the quiet one. At work, the reliable guy. To my family, the good son. But who was I when no one was watching? The girl in the mirror. The one who loved the weightlessness of skirts, the way earrings caught the light, the softness of lipstick on her lips. She wasn't a phase. She wasn't a costume. She was me, just buried under years of shoulds and can'ts. I crept out of bed and pulled the lilac dress from under the mattress. Holding it felt like holding my own heartbeat. I didn't put it on. Not yet. But I sat with it in my lap, running my fingers over the delicate seams, imagining what it would be like to walk into Maya's party wearing it. To be seen. Really seen. The next morning, I did something I'd never done before. I ordered a package to a P.O. box downtown. Not just any package, a dress. A real one. Navy blue, knee-length, with a modest neckline and cap sleeves. Classy. Elegant. The kind of dress that said, I belong here. I also ordered proper undergarments, a new wig, honey blonde this time, shoulder length, and a beginner's makeup kit. Each click of the mouse felt like stepping off a cliff, but instead of falling, I felt lighter. When the package arrived 3 days later, I carried it home like it was made of glass. I locked my bedroom door, sat on the floor, and opened it slowly, as if unveiling a relic. The dress smelled faintly of lavender and new fabric. I held it up to the light, and for the first time, I didn't just imagine the girl who would wear it. I knew her. Her name was Elise. I'd whispered it to myself in the shower, testing the syllables on my tongue like a secret prayer. Elise. It fit. That evening, I transformed again, but this time with purpose. I shaved carefully, applied foundation with YouTube tutorials playing softly in the background, practiced walking in low heels I'd bought secondhand. My reflection wavered between uncertainty and awe. I still saw traces of the old me, the broadness of my shoulders, the Adam's apple one couldn't hide, but now, they didn't feel like failures. They felt like history. And history could be honored without being repeated. Saturday came faster than I expected. The party loomed like a storm on the horizon, beautiful, terrifying, inevitable. I told Jamie I wasn't feeling well and wouldn't be going. But as dusk settled over the city, I stood in front of the mirror one last time, navy dress zipped, wig secured, lips painted a soft rose. Elise looked back at me, eyes wide with fear, and something else. Hope. I took a deep breath, grabbed my small clutch, and stepped out the door, not as the boy who lived here, but as the girl who finally dared to exist. The walk to Maya's apartment felt like crossing a border into a country I'd only read about in dreams. Every streetlight seemed to spotlight me, every passing car a potential witness to my secret. My heels clicked softly against the pavement, low, sensible heels, but still foreign enough to make my ankles wobble. I kept my head down, clutching the strap of my purse like a lifeline, rehearsing what I'd say if someone recognized me. Hi, I'm Elise. A friend of Jamie's. Simple. Clean. Believable. But my voice in my head sounded thin, unconvincing. I'd never been to Maya's place before, but I knew the building, a converted brownstone with ivy crawling up the brick and fairy lights strung across the porch. Music pulsed from an open window upstairs, muffled laughter spilling into the night like warm breath. I paused at the bottom of the steps, heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. Turn back, a voice inside me pleaded. This is too much. Too fast. But another voice, quieter but firmer, whispered, You've already come this far. I climbed the stairs. The door was open, propped with a potted fern. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of citrus candles and someone's vanilla perfume. Bodies moved in loose clusters, some dancing near the speakers, others leaning against the kitchen counter with red plastic cups. No one looked at me as I slipped inside. No gasps. No stares. Just acceptance. Or maybe indifference. Either way, it felt like grace. I found a quiet corner near a bookshelf and tried to breathe. My palms were slick, my mouth dry. I smoothed the front of my dress, checking for wrinkles, for signs of wrongness. But the fabric lay perfectly against my hips, the color deep and dignified. I caught my reflection in a dark windowpane. Elise, standing tall, eyes bright despite the fear coiled in her stomach. "You're doing it," I told her silently. "You're really doing it." Then Maya appeared. She was wearing a sequined crop top and wide-legged pants, hair piled into a messy bun, cheeks flushed from dancing. Her eyes scanned the room, landed on me, and widened. For a terrible second, I thought she'd recognized me. But then she smiled, warm and open, and walked over. "Hey. I don't think we've met," she said, extending a hand. "I'm Maya." "Elise," I said, shaking her hand. My voice came out softer than I intended, but steady. "Jamie mentioned the party. Hope it's okay I came." "Are you kidding? The more the merrier." She tilted her head, studying me with friendly curiosity. "You knew in the neighborhood?" "Sort of," I said, which wasn't a lie. "Just figuring things out." She nodded like she understood more than I'd said. "Well, welcome. Drinks are in the kitchen. There's sparkling water with lime if you're not into the hard stuff." "Perfect," I said, grateful for the excuse to move, to ground myself in a task. In the kitchen, I poured myself a cup, hands only trembling slightly. A few people nodded as I passed, but no one questioned my presence. It was surreal, how normal it all felt. Like I belonged. Like I'd always belonged. I returned to my corner, sipping slowly, watching the room. A couple swayed near the record player, laughing at something only they heard. Someone strummed a guitar in the hallway. The world kept turning, and somehow, I was still in it, just different. Better. Then I saw him. Across the room, leaning against the wall with a half smile and a beer in hand, was Leo. Leo from my philosophy seminar last semester. Quiet, thoughtful Leo, who always asked the questions no one else dared to. We'd exchanged maybe 10 words total, but I remembered the way his eyes lit up when he talked about ethics, how he tucked his hair behind his ear when he was nervous. And now he was looking right at me. Not through me. Not past me. At me. My breath hitched. I looked away quickly, but not before catching the flicker of something in his expression. Curiosity? Interest? Or just the usual party politeness? A few minutes later, he was walking toward me. I nearly dropped my cup. "Hey," he said, stopping a respectful distance away. His voice was even softer than I remembered. "I don't think we've met. I'm Leo." "Elise," I said again, forcing myself to meet his gaze. His eyes were hazel, flecked with gold in the lamplight. "Elise," he repeated, like he was tasting the name. "I like it. It suits you." My cheeks warmed. "Thanks." He gestured to the empty space beside me. "Mind if I join you?" Everyone else is either debating politics or trying to teach the dog how to moonwalk. I smiled, genuine, unguarded. "Please." We talked. Not about philosophy, not about school, but about music, about the weird bakery downtown that sold lavender croissants, about how the city felt different at night when you weren't rushing to be somewhere. He listened like every word mattered. And when he laughed, it was low and warm, like sunlight through curtains. At one point, he leaned in slightly to hear me over the music, and our shoulders brushed. Just for a second. But it sent a current through me, not just attraction, but something deeper, the feeling of being seen, not as a performance, but as a person. Later, as the party began to wind down, he asked, "Can I walk you home? It's getting late." I hesitated. Part of me screamed no. What if he found out? What if this fragile new version of me shattered under the weight of truth? But another part, the part that had worn this dress and walked through that door, whispered yes. "Okay," I said. We stepped out into the cool night air, the city humming softly around us. We didn't hold hands. We didn't need to. Just walking beside him, as Elise, felt like a kind of magic. And then, under a street lamp glowing amber against the dark, he stopped. "I had a really nice time tonight," he said, turning to me. His eyes searched mine, gentle, uncertain. "Would it be okay if I kissed you?" My heart stopped. This was it. The moment everything could change. One kiss as Elise, and I'd cross a threshold I could never uncross. But the fear was there, tangled with something brighter, longing. Not just for him, but for this, for the right to be kissed as myself. I nodded. He leaned in slowly, giving me time to pull away. I didn't. His lips were soft, warm, real. And in that kiss, under the amber light, with the city holding its breath around us, I didn't feel like I was pretending. I felt like I'd finally come home. The kiss lingered on my lips long after we'd pulled apart, soft, sweet, and trembling with the weight of everything unsaid. Leo stepped back just enough to search my face, his expression a mix of wonder and quiet concern, as if he sensed the storm of emotions swirling beneath my calm surface. "Was that okay?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, unable to speak. My throat had closed around the words I wanted to say. More than okay. It was the first real thing I've ever felt. But instead, I just smiled. Small, shy, honest, and he smiled back, relief softening the lines around his eyes. We walked the rest of the way in silence, but it wasn't awkward. It was the kind of quiet that feels like understanding, like two people sharing the same breath without needing to explain why. When we reached my building, I turned to him under the flickering porch light, suddenly aware of how vulnerable I was, not just as a girl, but as someone who had just let another person touch the very core of her truth. "Thank you," I said finally, voice steadier than I expected. "For what?" he asked, tucking his hands into his pockets. "For seeing me." He tilted his head, puzzled but kind. "I don't know what you mean. I just saw you." And that was the miracle of it. He didn't see a disguise. He didn't see a performance. He saw me, Elise, and treated her like she'd always existed. Like she deserved to. I went inside, climbed the stairs on unsteady legs, and locked my door behind me. Then I slid down to the floor, back against the wood, and let the tears come, not from sadness, but from a relief so profound it felt like healing. I touched my fingers to my lips, still warm from his kiss, and whispered into the dark. That was real. But reality has a way of catching up. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a text from Jamie. "Dude, you missed the party. Leo was asking about you. Said he met this girl named Elise and couldn't stop thinking about her." Wild, right? My stomach dropped. I stared at the screen, the words blurring. "Leo was asking about you. Not about Elise. About you." He thought Elise and I were two different people. And in a way, we were, but not in the way he imagined. Panic coiled in my chest. What if he told someone? What if he connected the dots? What if he showed up at my door looking for Elise and found me instead? The thought made me nauseous. Not because I was ashamed. No, that part of me was gone, but because I couldn't bear the idea of his kindness turning to confusion, or worse, disappointment. I spent the day in a fog, jumping at every notification, rehearsing explanations that never felt right. By evening, I knew I had to make a choice: keep Elise hidden, safe but secret, or risk everything to let her live in the light. I chose light. I messaged Leo, not from my usual number, but from a new one I'd set up weeks ago, just in case. My fingers hovered over the keys for 10 full minutes before I typed, "Hey, it's Elise. From the party. I really enjoyed meeting you." 3 dots appeared instantly. Then, "Elise. Hey. I was hoping you'd reach out. I've been wondering if last night was as special for you as it was for me." My breath caught. "It was," I wrote back. "But there's something I need to tell you. In person. If you're willing." He replied without hesitation, "Always." We agreed to meet at the park near the river, the same one with the old stone bridge and willow trees that dipped into the water like they were whispering secrets to the current. I wore the navy dress again, but this time with a light cardigan over it, as if the extra layer might shield me from whatever came next. He was already there when I arrived, sitting on a bench with his hands clasped between his knees, looking more nervous than I'd ever seen him. When he saw me, he stood quickly, almost knocking over his coffee cup. "Hey," he said, voice rough with emotion. "Hey," I replied. We sat side by side, not touching, the space between us charged with everything left unsaid. The river murmured beside us, carrying fallen leaves toward the horizon. "I don't know how to say this," I began, staring at my hands. "But I need you to know that Elise is real. She's not a character. She's not a phase. She's me." He didn't speak right away. Just listened, his presence steady, patient. "I was assigned male at birth," I continued, the words feeling both foreign and freeing on my tongue. "But that's never been who I am. Elise is. And last night, that was the first time I'd ever been kissed as myself. Silence stretched, thin and fragile. I braced for the recoil, the polite withdrawal, that I'm not ready for this speech I'd heard in so many stories. Instead, Leo turned to me, eyes glistening. "Thank you," he said softly. I blinked. For what? For trusting me with that. He reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away, and gently took my hand. "Elise, I don't care about the past. I care about you. The person I talked to last night. The person who loves lavender croissants and gets quiet when she's thinking deeply. That's who I like." Tears spilled over before I could stop them. Not from sadness, but from the sheer, staggering weight of being accepted. He squeezed my hand. "So, can I still take you on a proper date? Maybe somewhere with fewer witnesses and more pie?" I laughed through my tears. "Yes. Absolutely." We sat there for a long time, hands intertwined, watching the river carry the day away. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was living two lives. I felt like I was finally living one, whole, honest, and beautifully, terrifyingly real. But peace is rarely permanent. 2 days later, I got a call from my mother. "Sweetheart," she said, voice tight with something I couldn't place, "your father and I saw a photo on Maya's Instagram. From the party. There's a girl. She looks just like you. Is everything okay?" My blood ran cold. The phone felt like ice in my hand. My mother's voice, usually warm, laced with the scent of cinnamon and Sunday pancakes, now carried an edge I'd never heard before, concern wrapped in confusion, maybe even suspicion. "She looks just like you," she'd said. "Not exactly like you. Not is that you? But close enough to make my stomach twist into knots." I forced my voice to stay steady. "Oh, that's probably just a coincidence, Mom. People say I look like half the guys in my building." She paused. "It's not a guy, honey. It's a girl. With blonde hair. Wearing a blue dress." My breath hitched. Maya must have posted a group photo, maybe one with Leo and me near the bookshelf, half in shadow, half in light. I hadn't even thought to check social media. Stupid. Careless. Now, the life I'd so carefully built outside my family's view was seeping into theirs like water through cracked glass. "Maybe it's someone who just resembles me," I said, too quickly. "You know how that happens." Another pause. Longer this time. I could hear her breathing, the soft rustle of her cardigan as she shifted the phone. "Your father's worried. He says you've been distant lately. Are you in some kind of trouble?" "No," I said, voice cracking. "I'm not in trouble. I'm fine." But the word fine tasted like ash. Because I wasn't fine. I was standing at the edge of a cliff, and the ground beneath me was starting to crumble. We ended the call with promises to talk soon, with "I love yous" that felt heavier than usual. After I hung up, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the lilac dress still tucked under the mattress like a buried treasure. Or a time bomb. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the building, every notification on my phone, sent my heart racing. What if they called Jamie? What if they asked Leo? What if they showed up at my door demanding answers I wasn't ready to give, not because I was ashamed, but because I didn't know how to explain a truth that still felt too new, too tender, to put into words for people who'd only ever known me as their son. The next morning, I avoided my phone. I skipped class. I walked to the river alone, the same path where Leo and I had sat, and stood on the stone bridge, watching the water rush beneath me. The willow branches swayed, their leaves whispering secrets I couldn't quite hear. I thought about running, packing a bag, disappearing into another city, another name. But then I thought of Leo's hand in mine, of Maya's easy welcome, of the way the navy dress had made me feel like I finally belonged in my own skin. I couldn't run. Not anymore. Instead, I made a decision. I would tell them. Not over the phone. Not through a blurry photo. In person. On my terms. I booked a train ticket home for the weekend. One way. No return date. I packed carefully. My everyday clothes, yes, but also the navy dress, the honey blonde wig, my makeup bag. Not as a costume, but as proof. As evidence of a life I was no longer willing to hide. The night before I left, Leo came over. He brought pie, cherry, my favorite, and sat with me on the floor of my room while I explained everything. My parents' call, my fear, my plan. He didn't try to fix it. He just listened, his presence a quiet anchor in the storm. "You don't have to do this alone," he said when I finished. "I know," I whispered. "But I had to be the one to say it." He nodded. Then, gently, he reached into his bag and pulled out a small velvet box. My breath caught, but it wasn't jewelry. Inside was a single pearl earring, simple and luminous. "My grandmother gave these to me before she passed," he said. "She said pearls are formed under pressure, that they are proof that beauty can come from pain." He held it out. "Wear it tomorrow. For courage." I took it, tears welling again. "Thank you." He stayed until dawn, holding my hand while I slept fitfully, his presence a silent promise that no matter what happened, I wouldn't be unloved. The train ride home was long and quiet. I watched the city shrink in the window, replaced by suburbs, then fields, then the familiar hills of my childhood. With every mile, my chest grew tighter. I kept touching the pearl earring in my pocket, its smooth surface a tiny talisman. When I stepped off the train, my parents were waiting on the platform. My mother's eyes went straight to my face, searching. My father stood stiffly beside her, hands in his coat pockets, expression unreadable. They didn't hug me. Not yet. "Let's go home," my mother said softly. And so we did. The house smelled exactly as I remembered, like old books, lemon polish, and the faintest trace of my dad's pipe tobacco, even though he hadn't smoked in years. It was a scent woven into my bones, a comfort I hadn't realized I'd been carrying like a secret blanket. But now, standing in the hallway with my suitcase at my feet and the pearl earring warm in my pocket, that comfort felt fragile, like glass balanced on the edge of a table. My parents didn't ask questions right away. They made tea, my mother's chamomile blend with too much honey, just how I used to like it, and we sat in the living room, the silence thick with everything we weren't saying. Sunlight streamed through the bay window, catching dust motes in the air, and for a moment, it almost felt normal. Almost. Then my father cleared his throat. "We saw the photo," he said, voice low. "Maya tagged you in the comments. Said, 'Miss you, Elise.'" My stomach dropped. Of course she had. Casual. Friendly. Devastating. I took a slow breath. "Yes," I said. "That was me." My mother's hands tightened around her mug. "But, you're a boy." The words weren't cruel. They were confused. Heartbroken, even. And that hurt more than anger ever could. "I was assigned male at birth," I said carefully, choosing each word like stepping on ice. "But I've never felt like a boy. Not really. Elise, she's who I've always been." I just didn't have the words, or the courage, to say it until now. My father stood abruptly, pacing to the window. "This is a lot," he said, back turned. "You're talking about changing your whole life. Your name. Your body. Everything we thought we knew about you." "I'm not changing who I am," I said, voice trembling but clear. "I'm finally becoming who I've always been." My mother looked at me then, not at my clothes, not at my hair, but into my eyes. "Are you happy?" she asked quietly. The question caught me off guard. Not "is this a phase?" Not "what will people say?" Just, "Are you happy?" Tears welled. "Yes," I whispered. "For the first time in my life, yes." She reached out, slowly, and took my hand. Her skin was cool, familiar. Then that matters more than anything. My father turned around. His eyes were red-rimmed, his jaw tight. "I don't understand," he admitted, voice rough. "But I love you. And if this is who you are, then I'll learn." It wasn't perfect. It wasn't instant acceptance wrapped in a bow. But it was a start. And in that moment, it was enough. Later that evening, after a quiet dinner where we talked about everything except the thing that had brought me home, I went to my old room. Nothing had changed. The same navy blue walls, the same posters of bands I no longer listened to, the same bed with the slightly lumpy mattress. But I didn't feel like a stranger here. I felt like someone returning after a long journey, carrying new maps in her heart. I opened my suitcase and took out the navy dress. Then, with shaking hands, I put it on. I didn't wear the wig. I didn't do my makeup. I just stood in front of the full-length mirror on the closet door, barefoot, hair still short, face clean, but wearing the dress like a vow. When I stepped out into the hallway, my parents were in the kitchen, washing dishes together in the quiet rhythm they'd perfected over 30 years. They both turned when they saw me. My mother's breath caught. My father froze, a plate in his hands. I didn't say anything. I just stood there, letting them see me. Not as a performance. Not as a protest. Just as Elise. My mother walked over first. She touched the sleeve of the dress, her fingers gentle. "It's beautiful," she said. My father set the plate down and approached more slowly. He looked at my face, then at the dress, then back at my face. "You look like yourself," he said finally, and the words were a gift. That night, for the first time, I slept in my childhood bed as Elise. Not hiding. Not pretending. Just existing. The next morning, my mother asked, "Would you like to go shopping? I think we should get you something that fits better. And maybe some earrings." I smiled. "I already have one," I said, pulling the pearl from my pocket. "But I'd love to find its match." We spent the afternoon in town, wandering through boutiques and department stores. She held up blouses, asked my opinion on fabrics, laughed when I twirled in a sunflower yellow skirt that swirled around my knees like liquid light. At one point, she paused in front of a mirror, watching me adjust the collar of a soft pink cardigan, and said, "You've always had your grandmother's eyes. She would have loved seeing you like this." I didn't know what to say, so I just hugged her. When I returned to the city 2 days later, I didn't feel like I was leaving home. I felt like I was carrying it with me, stitched into the seams of my new clothes, tucked into the curve of my smile, held in the quiet strength of my parents' growing understanding. Leo met me at the station. He didn't say anything at first. Just looked at me, really looked, and then smiled like he'd been waiting for this version of me all along. "You're glowing," he said. I touched the single pearl earring still in my ear. "I feel like I can breathe." We walked back to my apartment hand in hand, the city alive around us. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was living in the shadows. But life, even when it's kind, rarely stays still for long. A week later, I got an email from the university's Student Services office. Subject line, "Regarding your request for name and gender marker update." My hands shook as I opened it. The email was formal, crisp, and utterly life-altering. "Dear student," it began, "we acknowledge your request to update your legal name and gender marker in university records. Please find attached the necessary forms and documentation requirements." I read it 3 times, each pass sending a fresh wave of disbelief through me. This wasn't just paperwork, it was validation. A stamp of recognition from an institution that had, for years, called me by a name that never fit, listed me under a gender that never felt true. Now, they were offering me a chance to be seen, not as an exception, not as a footnote, but as myself. I printed the forms that afternoon, the printer humming like a quiet cheerleader. Each page felt heavy with possibility. I filled in Elise Marie Carter with a pen that barely trembled, my handwriting looping with a confidence I didn't know I possessed. The old name, crossed out with a single, firm line, didn't haunt me. It simply faded, like a photograph left too long in the sun. But the real hurdle was the legal affidavit. I needed a letter from a licensed healthcare provider confirming my gender identity. I'd been seeing Dr. Lin, a gentle, no-nonsense therapist who specialized in gender-affirming care, for the past 2 months. She'd listened without judgment as I untangled years of silence, and when I finally said, "I think I'm transgender," she simply nodded and said, "Thank you for trusting me with that." Her letter arrived 3 days later in a crisp envelope. I opened it at my kitchen table, Leo sitting across from me with a mug of tea, his presence a quiet anchor. "Elise Carter has consistently and unequivocally affirmed her female gender identity." I read the words aloud, voice cracking on female. It wasn't clinical. It wasn't cold. It was true. And seeing it in print, on official letterhead, signed in blue ink, made something inside me settle. Like a key turning in a lock I didn't know existed. With the documents gathered, I submitted everything online. Then came the waiting. During that time, I started living more openly as Elise, not just in private, not just at parties, but everywhere. I changed my name on my student ID. I updated my email signature. I walked into my literature seminar wearing a floral blouse and kitten heels, and when the professor called roll, I raised my hand and said, "Here," without flinching. Some people stared. A few whispered. But most just nodded and moved on. And that was its own kind of miracle. Then, one rainy Tuesday, another email arrived. "Your name and gender marker have been successfully updated in all university systems." I read it standing in the campus library, rain tapping against the tall windows like applause. My vision blurred. I didn't cry, not right then, but my chest swelled with a quiet, unshakable pride. I was Elise. Officially. Legally. Irrevocably. That evening, I celebrated with Leo and Jamie at our favorite rooftop cafe. Jamie, who'd been nothing but supportive since I'd gently explained everything over late-night pizza, raised their glass and said, "To Elise, the girl who finally showed up and stole all our hearts." We laughed. We ate too much dessert. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was playing a role. I was just me. But as the weeks passed, a new kind of tension began to grow, not from fear, but from anticipation. My parents had started using my name without prompting. My professors adjusted their rosters without fuss. Even the barista at the coffee shop near campus began writing Elise on my cup before I could say it. Everything was falling into place. And yet, something still felt unfinished. It wasn't about documents or names or even acceptance. It was about voice. About claiming my story not just in private moments, but in the world. One night, as I scrolled through social media, I saw a flyer for an open MIC night at a local LGBTQ+ community center. The theme, First Times. My fingers hovered over the screen. I'd never spoken publicly about my journey. Never shared the fear, the joy, the quiet revolution of becoming myself. But maybe it was time. I signed up. The community center smelled like old wood, lavender hand soap, and the faint sweetness of someone's vanilla candle. Folding chairs were arranged in a loose semicircle around a small wooden stool with a single microphone on a stand. Fairy lights hung from the ceiling, casting a warm, golden glow over everything, like the room itself was holding its breath in kindness. I sat in the back row, clutching a folded piece of paper in my hands. My poem, First Kiss as a Girl, was scribbled in blue ink, the edges slightly crumpled from how often I'd reread it. I'd written it in one sleepless night, the words pouring out like a confession I'd been saving for years. It wasn't polished. It wasn't perfect. But it was honest. My name was third on the list. As the first speaker, a non-binary poet with a voice like gravel and honey, stepped up and shared a piece about their first haircut after coming out, I felt my pulse quicken. Not with fear, exactly, but with something deeper, the terrifying, exhilarating sense that I was about to do something irreversible. To speak my truth in front of strangers was to make it real in a way even documents couldn't. When the host called my name, "Elise, you're up," my legs moved before my mind could protest. I walked to the MIC on unsteady feet. The room was quiet, expectant. Faces turned toward me, not judging, just listening. I took a breath, unfolded my paper, and began. I never knew a dress could feel like a homecoming. I read, my voice softer than I intended, but clear. But the first time I slipped it on, soft, lilac chiffon with a neckline that dipped just enough to make my breath catch, I didn't recognize the person staring back at me in the mirror. Not because she was unfamiliar, but because she was too familiar. I didn't look up. I kept my eyes on the page, but I could feel the room leaning in. When I reached the part about Leo's kiss under the amber street lamp, my voice wavered, but I didn't stop. When I described my mother's question, "Are you happy?" a few people in the front row dabbed their eyes. And when I ended with, "That kiss wasn't just my first as a girl. It was my first as myself," the room didn't erupt in applause. It exhaled. A slow, collective release of understanding. Then came the clapping, warm, steady, full of respect. Not pity. Not spectacle. Just recognition. Afterward, people came up to me one by one. A trans elder with silver hair and a cane squeezed my hand and said, "You just gave someone in this room permission to breathe." A young person with glitter on their cheeks whispered, "I'm not out yet, but I will be. Because of you." Even the host, a soft-spoken drag storyteller named River, hugged me and said, "You've got a voice that needs to be heard, Elise. Don't you dare hide it." I walked home that night with Leo beside me, the city lights reflecting in puddles like scattered stars. My chest felt lighter, as if I'd shed a skin I didn't know I was still wearing. But the real surprise came 2 days later. An email from the community center's programming coordinator. "We'd love to invite you to perform at our annual Trans Visibility Night. It's a larger event, 150+ attendees, local press sometimes covers it. Would you consider it?" My first instinct was to say no. Too big. Too public. Too much. But then I remembered the girl in the lilac dress, trembling in front of the mirror, too afraid to answer the door. She wouldn't recognize the woman I was becoming, the one who kissed under streetlights, who stood before strangers and said, "This is me." So I wrote back, "Yes." Preparations began immediately. I revised my poem, added new verses about my parents' slow, tender acceptance, about the weight of a single pearl earring, about the quiet courage it takes to exist when the world wasn't built for you. I practiced in front of the mirror, then in front of Leo, then in front of Jamie, who cried halfway through and said, "Damn, Elise. You're gonna change lives." The night of the event arrived faster than I expected. I wore the navy dress again, now slightly altered to fit me better, hemmed by my mother's careful hands, but this time I paired it with the matching pearl earrings Leo had helped me find. My hair was styled in soft waves, my makeup subtle but confident. I looked like someone who belonged on a stage. Backstage, my hands wouldn't stop shaking. River found me pacing near the curtain and handed me a sprig of lavender. "For courage," they said with a wink. "And because you smell like a nervous cupcake right now." I laughed, the tension breaking just enough. Then my name was called. The spotlight was brighter than I remembered, the audience larger. But as I stepped into the light, microphone in hand, I didn't see strangers. I saw reflections, of myself, of others who'd walked this path, of those still hiding in the wings. I took a breath. And I began. The first words left my lips like birds released from a cage, hesitant at first, then soaring. The room fell utterly still, as if the city outside had paused its breath just to listen. I spoke of mirrors and lilac chiffon, of trembling hands and borrowed eyeliner, of a kiss that tasted like permission. I spoke of my father's silence and my mother's honeysweet tea, of the train ride home with a suitcase full of hope and a single pearl in my pocket. And I spoke of the moment I realized that becoming myself wasn't about erasing the past, but about finally letting the truth bloom through the cracks. When I finished, there was a beat of silence so profound I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. Then, applause. Not polite clapping, but a wave of sound that rose from the audience like a tide, warm and overwhelming. People stood. Some wiped their eyes. A few shouted, "Thank you," or "We see you." Not as spectacle, but as solidarity. I stepped back from the MIC, legs trembling, and River was there instantly, pulling me into a hug that smelled like patchouli and stage makeup. "You were magnificent," they whispered. "You shone." Backstage, I sat on a folding chair, clutching the sprig of lavender, trying to steady my breathing. My phone buzzed in my purse. A text from my mother. "We watched the live stream. You are beautiful. So proud of you, sweetheart." Below it, a photo she'd taken of my father, tears in his eyes, hand over his mouth, staring at the laptop screen. I pressed the phone to my chest and let myself cry, not from sadness, but from the sheer, staggering weight of being loved exactly as I was. After the event, a local journalist approached me. "Would you be open to a short interview?" she asked gently. "Just your story. Nothing invasive. We're doing a feature on trans joy, not just struggle, but joy." I hesitated. Publicity still scared me. But then I thought of the young person at the open MIC who'd whispered, "I will be out because of you." If my voice could be a lantern for someone else's path, wasn't that worth a little fear? I said yes. The article came out a week later. It was titled "First Kisses Herself, A Story of Becoming." It included a photo of me in the navy dress, standing by the river at sunset, one hand touching the pearl at my ear. The piece was kind, respectful, and focused not on transition as trauma, but on transformation as triumph. It went viral in quiet, meaningful ways, shared by LGBTQ+ centers, reposted by allies, quoted in support group chats. Messages poured in. From strangers. From old classmates. Even from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years, who wrote, "I didn't understand before. But I see you now. And you're radiant." But the most unexpected message came from someone I never expected to hear from again. It was from my high school English teacher, Ms. Delaney, the one who'd once pulled me aside after class and said, "You write like you're hiding something. Don't be afraid to let it out." She'd retired years ago, moved to the coast. Yet here she was, emailing, "I read your story. I always knew there was a poet inside you. Thank you for finally letting her speak." That night, Leo took me to the rooftop cafe again, the same one where we'd celebrated my name change. The city glittered below us, endless and alive. He reached across the table and took my hand. "You know," he said, smiling. I think the world's ready for more of Elise. I laughed softly. I'm not sure I'm ready for the world.
But you're doing it anyway, he said.
That's what courage is.
And he was right. I wasn't fearless. I still checked over my shoulder in public restrooms.
I still flinched when someone used my old name by accident. I still woke some nights wondering if I'd imagined it all, if I'd dreamed the dress, the kiss, the applause. But then I'd touch the pearls at my ears, or catch my reflection in a store window, shoulders back, chin high, eyes bright. And remember, this is real.
You are real.
A few days later, I received another email, this time from the university's creative writing department.
They'd read the article.
They'd seen the video. And they wanted to know, would I be interested in leading a student workshop on authentic storytelling?
Me, Elise.
Teaching others how to find their voice.
I stared at the screen for a long time.
Then I typed my reply, yes.
With joy.
The first day of the workshop arrived on a crisp autumn morning, golden light spilling through the tall windows of the university's writing studio. I stood at the front of the room in a cream-colored sweater and a skirt that swished softly with every step, my pearl earrings catching the sun like tiny promises. On the chalkboard behind me, I'd written 2 words in looping script, tell true. 10 students sat in a circle, some nervous, some curious, all holding notebooks like shields. I recognized a few from my old lectures, faces that had once looked through me now watching with open attention. My hands trembled slightly as I introduced myself, but my voice didn't waver. My name is Elise, I said. And I'm here not because I have all the answers, but because I finally learned how to ask the right questions. We spent the first hour talking about masks, the ones we wear to survive, the ones we mistake for our faces. I didn't tell my whole story again.
I didn't need to.
Instead, I asked them, what truth have you been too afraid to write? One student, a quiet boy with ink-stained fingers, whispered, that I don't know who I am yet. Another, a girl with bright green hair, said, that I'm angry all the time, and I don't know why. And a non-binary student in the back, eyes glistening, simply said, that I exist.
I nodded.
Then that's where we start. Over the next few weeks, the room became a sanctuary. Pages filled with confessions, dreams, fears.
We read aloud in hushed tones. We cried. We laughed.
And slowly, something miraculous happened. They began to see each other, and themselves, not as problems to fix, but as stories worth telling. One afternoon, after class, a student lingered. She was new to campus, soft-spoken, always sitting in the back. She held out a folded piece of paper. I wrote something, she said, about trying on my sister's dress when I was 12. I've never shown anyone. I took it gently. Thank you for trusting me.
She hesitated.
Do you ever still feel like an imposter?
I smiled. Every now and then.
But then I remember, an imposter pretends to be someone else.
I'm just finally being me.
There's a difference. She nodded, tears in her eyes, and walked away a little taller. That night, I went home and stood in front of my mirror, the same one that once reflected only fear. Now, it showed a woman with tired eyes and a full heart, wearing a simple cotton dress and no makeup, yet glowing with a quiet certainty. I touched the pearls at my ears, then reached into my jewelry box and pulled out the lilac dress, still wrapped in tissue paper. I held it for a long moment, then hung it in the front of my closet. No longer hidden, no longer a secret, but a reminder of where I'd begun. A few days later, Leo and I walked through the park again, the same one with the stone bridge and whispering willows. The leaves had turned crimson and gold, falling like embers around us. He stopped midway across the bridge, turned to me, and took both my hands. I've been thinking, he said, voice soft but sure. I don't just want to date you, Elise. I want to know you. All of you. The past, the present, the future you're still becoming. I looked into his eyes, hazel, warm, unwavering, and felt no fear. Only gratitude. Only love.
I'm still learning her myself, I said.
But I'd be honored to let you walk beside her. He kissed me then, not under a street lamp this time, but in the open daylight, with the river flowing beneath us and the wind carrying the last of the autumn leaves. And as his lips met mine, I didn't think about being seen or judged or misunderstood. I simply was, Elise, whole and real and finally free. Later, as we walked back toward the city, hand in hand, I realized something. The first kiss as a girl hadn't just been a moment.
It had been a doorway.
And I'd stepped through it, not into perfection, not into ease, but into a life where I could love myself enough to let others love me too.
The journey wasn't over. It never really is.
But for the first time, I wasn't walking it in the dark.
I was walking it as myself. And that was more than enough.